Hello, friends. Welcome to Non-Toxic Environments. This is Andy Pace, your host. This week we have Heidi Kuimjian on the show to talk about all things ranging from just healthy living to healthy fabrics and clothing. She's an expert in healthy clothing and fabrics. Matter of fact, I'll link in the show notes a link directly to purchase her ebook to guide you through the array of clothing materials and fabrics on the market, and she really dives deep into that. I was on Heidi's show a few weeks back on her podcast called Lifelong, which is, if you haven't listened to her podcast yet, you certainly want to. She's just a very easy to understand, speaks very plainly yet very intelligently about all aspects of healthy living, and I was really blown away by not only the topics she had in her podcast, but then the questions that she had for me for her show really had me diving deep into some of the things that I talk about fairly regularly, but she really had me pinpoint my answers a little bit better, so I really appreciated being on her show. Anyway, we've been wanting to get her on the Non-Toxic Environments podcast, had a chance to have her on the Non-Toxic Environments live video program on our Circle community just this past week. If you haven't joined the Circle community yet, please do. There'll be a link down below the show notes. It's free to join. Everybody who's a listener, a past customer, previous customer, just interested in all aspects of healthy building, healthy living, we ask you to join the Circle community. And once you're a member, you'll have access to watching these live weekly interviews that I do. And as a Circle member, watching the interviews, we'll ask you to, if you have any questions or comments, you can actually interact with the guests. And so that's the only way you'll be able to do that. We don't do this on YouTube. We don't do this on Facebook. We only do it through our Circle community because we want this to be a very easy, open exchange of knowledge, and we want it to be sort of a safer place for people to go to without fear of getting spammed by people from all over the world who have no desire to be there except for just making your day lousy. And so that's why we have the Circle community, very close-knit community of like-minded individuals. So please join us there and listen to and interact with these weekly guests that we have. Again, so here is last week's guest, Heidi Kuimjian, to talk about healthy living. Heidi, welcome to Non-Toxic Environments.
Hello, thank you so much for the warm welcome, and I'm so excited to be here.
Excellent. Well, so if you've watched some of the past shows, so far we've done 5 or 6 episodes of the live show. What's really cool about this show is that we have our own Circle community of listeners and followers and past customers that have access to come on the show live if they want to ask questions. They also have the ability to watch the show afterwards at a more convenient time for them. I know it's tough because I have clients all over the world, and so we had to pick a time. So we said 12 noon Central Time because that's most convenient for me, because I can't make it convenient for everybody around the world. So we're just going to do this time. So first off, thank you for making this time available to share with us. And then second, please give us a little background about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, well, again, thank you so much. My name is Heidi Kuimjian, and I have a long story, but I'm going to give you all the Spark Notes version. So I have been passionate about holistic health since I was 16 years old. For context, I'm turning 27 this year, so about 10, 11 years, I have been full-blown into holistic health. And it wasn't by choice, like a lot of us in this industry. We get into this not by choice. I know, everyone has different stories, but with me, I ended up having a lot of chronic health things going on when I was a teenager. And my mom was very into health, holistic living, or eating organic, doing all the things. And this was years ago. So it was still very taboo. And I was a teenager and I thought this was weird. I thought my mom was weird. I wanted nothing to do with it until I started having a lot of these health issues. And the main thing that was going on was I was having panic attacks, and I intrinsically knew that I didn't want to be on medication. So, and I'm sharing this detail because this is how I got entered into this world. The very beginning of my story starts at this age when I'm having panic attacks. I'm having all these other random things going on. I remember sensitivity to light, trouble focusing in school, and all these things. And I'm like, but I don't want to be on medication. So what do I do? So my mom was like, well, why don't we go to this lady and she's going to poke needles in you? And this was acupuncture. So I start seeing this doctor of acupuncture who totally changed my world and inspired the path I'm on today, because in going to her at this young age and having her quite literally heal me, she also educated me about the importance of food and just a natural life. Even though my mom was trying to push this onto me, it was very different having it come from someone that wasn't a family member. So anyways, that was kind of my introduction to all of this. Fast forward a couple years, I'm doing better. I'm healed. I go to college, and 3 weeks into college, I wake up one day and I cannot take a full deep breath. Oh. My breathing is so short and it feels like there's an elephant on my chest, but it doesn't feel like a chest cold. It feels extreme. It feels horrible. So I do exactly what I need to do. I go to the doctor, I get, checked and all the things. And from that point forward, through the next 3.5 years, I was dismissed by doctors as crazy. And I struggled every single day with severe breathing issues and also neurological issues. After those 3.5 years, something pivotal happened. And I should say, during all those years, I was researching, I was trying all the things. I really wanted to feel better. I wanted to figure out what was going on. I knew that I wasn't just an anxious mess and crazy. Yes, anxiety played a part of this, this cycle, but I knew that physically something was really off. I shouldn't have felt this way because I was healthy and I was young. This started when I was 18 years old. And so going through all of that was very traumatic. I was doing all this research, and by my winter break, senior year of college, I'm reading this book that my mom had. I was at her house for the holidays. And in this book, it's talking about toxins. And I remember it was talking about heavy metals, mold, EMFs, different things that I had heard of, but I didn't know specifically what they could do to the body. So it wrote out these different toxins, and then it also wrote out symptoms. And this was the first time, and it probably sounds weird because nowadays we have, and this was, only like 5 years ago, but even 5 years since today, there's so much information. But at the time, there wasn't a lot of information about toxins and what they do to the body. And so for the first time ever, I realized that oh my gosh, something is physically going on with me, because look, there's evidence, there's validation that my really strange symptoms, for example, one of the most bizarre symptoms, and maybe someone listening can relate to this, especially if they've gone through mold illness, was I was having weird electrical sensations in my chest, where it felt like, I've never had a seizure, so I don't know what that feels like, but it felt seizure-like because I wasn't in control of my body, and it was like a zap. And it was hard to explain. You tell that to a doctor and they're like, you're crazy. But anyway, so pinpointing and reading this list of these super specific symptoms that I had, I was like, oh my goodness, I think I found my answer that I've been searching for 3.5 years. So after that happened, I was finally filled with hope and so excited to have a little bit more direction for my research and figuring out a plan to getting better. And I ended up detoxing from basically an overburdened toxic load in my body, which mainly was from mold and mycotoxins. And I did a 180 with my health. I healed myself completely. So that is the reason I am in this world of holistic health. And upon that, I graduated college. Again, trying to keep this Spark Notes version. I graduated college and I started working in the textile industry because I studied textile and fashion design. And then alongside that, I launched my health coaching business, Holistic with Heidi. And as of this year, I actually pivoted my health coaching business to a boutique marketing consultancy for wellness brands. So when I was in my corporate job, I was doing marketing in the textile industry, and then I was doing health coaching. I also have my podcast, Lifelong Podcast, and now it's turned into I have my podcast and I do my wellness marketing. So that is the hopefully shortish story of my long story.
Well, that's fabulous. No, I love how you have gravitated to what you know and what you love. And, I think a lot of us in this industry and those of us who have been suffering for so many years with sensitivities of all kinds know that you learn so much during the process that at some point you say, I need to be able to give back and I need to be able to share this with others so that they don't have to go through what I went through. And you're right. In the last 5 years, the amount of information out there is staggering compared to where it was. When I started in 1992, 93, the term green was still just a color.
Oh, yeah. I can't even imagine.
And we didn't have the internet.
Yeah, that's my mind is blown completely.
Yeah, so I'd have to go to the library and do research the old-fashioned way. It was tough, very tough. And I mean, I think that helped me in many ways, but I think now with what we have access to at our fingertips and what we have access to in our earbuds with the shows and they're out there and professionals like you, I think we are now if you do fall into the category of being sensitive, mold sensitive, EMF sensitive, so forth, this is a great time to now be looking for cures, for assistance, for ways to mitigate. And I want to get back to something that you touched on, and I'm really curious to hear your response to this. When you first were diagnosed, or you kind of self-diagnosed, right?
Self-diagnosed.
And obviously it was true. I mean, what you found was true. Mm-hmm. How did your family and friends react to that? And were they supportive? Were they kind of like, she's a little nuts, but okay? I mean, how do they come to you with this?
Yeah. Oh, I love that question. So, like I said, my mom was always into all of this from a young age. She's the mom who's into all the woo-woo stuff. Like she's super open-minded, and she was my rock through all of that. During that time too, I met my boyfriend, now fiance, and he could not be more supportive. So I feel that the people in my circle, they knew me so well. They knew how determined I was because they saw all of those years of suffering and they saw the research that I was putting into getting better, that I was supported by everyone that I was close to. Of course, there's certain people that I wouldn't explain. I have a big family. I'm not going to sit down with everyone and say, hey, I got sick from mold, but the people that I was and am closest to truly supported me because they knew how invested I was in getting better. And they also were like-minded. So I'm really blessed in that sense.
And that's wonderful. I think that all of us have situations where we know somebody who is going through this, who has gone through it. And I find that in order to be a proponent of these these alternative methods and materials, you have to actually live through it yourself or know somebody who has. And I think that's very difficult for somebody off the street who doesn't know anybody who's ever had a mold sensitivity before to hear your story and others who have gone through this to not think that that's that's just not right. I mean, that's something's wrong. It's not a mold. I mean, I'm around mold all the time. How come I'm not sick? And
Mm.
I hear that so much from contractors. They're
It's
the
so
ones saying,
dismissive.
"Oh yeah, yeah. Well, if they can't, if they're not getting sick from this, then how can you get sick?"
It's crazy.
It is. And so every time somebody goes through this and has that story to share, I love to bring that out to the audience because we need more people to talk about it. It needs to be more mainstream because I think it is. I think that there's, years ago, 30 years ago, it was estimated somewhere around 25% of the American population has a chemical sensitivity of some sort, whether they know it or not.
Wow.
You know, these are people who are walking through the department store and they just instinctively avoid the perfume aisle because they know it's going to give them a headache.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, why does it give them a headache? That's a chemical sensitivity. That's a reaction.
Yep.
And so fast forward now 30 years, and now we're dealing with electromagnetic fields and we're dealing more with mold because we understand it more now.
Mm-hmm.
5, 6 years ago, we didn't have the genetic testing to say whether you're predisposed to have mold sensitivity or not.
Mm-hmm.
We have that now. So I think that 25% is probably more like 50% of the population has some type of sensitivity or has a reaction to these things. But most people just decide to ignore it because it's easier to ignore than it is to actually try to learn and understand and research the way you did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have to chime in there for a second because as far as the mold toxicity, like you said, it's becoming more prevalent because there's more testing. Another reason that it is becoming more prevalent, though, is because of things like EMFs. Because EMFs, there are studies that show that EMFs and mold exacerbate one another. And then on top of that, we live in a society, not to be doom and gloom, because I like to remain positive, but the reality is we live in a very toxic world, and the toxicities are increasing in other areas, not just in mold. For example, our food system is really bad, and there's a lot of things that we're up against in this chemical world. And when that is all bombarding a person, that is impacting their immune system, and the immune system is what is affected by mold. So it's kind of like this toxic soup, and you need to get your body into balance. And that's why I really advocate for a lower toxic lifestyle and making decisions when you can, when applicable. We talked about this when you were on my show with upgrading things in your home, maybe not renovating your whole house at once because that's unrealistic, but thinking about those areas that cover the most surface that are the most toxic so that you can reduce your toxic burden and in turn improve your immunity and your resiliency to these different chemical bombardments that we'll have in our world when you're outside of your home.
So I want to get into a couple of specifics, especially since in light of your last couple of podcasts. But before I get to that, I've got to ask you because you said a lot in that last couple of minutes, and we're all surrounded with. So leave the doom and gloom to me, I guess. So because I'm known for kind of bringing this, but then I wrap it up with usually a call to action on how we change things. But honestly, it's we're surrounded with mold. Mold is everywhere. Mold isn't a bad thing unless it's a certain type of mold and it's at a level that's higher than what it should be. But it could be mold coming from your built environment. It could be mold coming from your food sources, right?
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of times people have this problem with okay, if everything in my life now needs to be addressed, how do I even start? And if I start, is it going to make enough of an impact? It's like working out. It's, joining a health club and working out. The very most difficult part is getting yourself there the first time.
Yeah.
And I think it's because we all want a quick fix, and we all think that there's a pill or some type of something we can take, or a program we can follow. But ultimately, we all know it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of effort, and so people are afraid to start that process. So with your clientele, somebody hires you and they have all these sources of pollutants in their home. Where's a good place to start?
Yeah, I definitely want to echo you on the note of preventing overwhelm and just validating that this can be very overwhelming, and that, it's really important to meet people where they are at. So that is number one for me, is, okay, getting on their level, truly trying to understand what the person is going through, what their level of knowledge is in these areas, and taking a step back and letting my, ego go too, because not that I'm someone with a big ego or anything like that, but it's important when you're a non-toxic educator to not show up in a way that is very intimidating or arrogant,
Mm-hmm.
So what I would recommend for those people is to take baby steps and think about the areas that they're spending their the most time in. So certain areas include the bedroom and the office. I would actually say start by upgrading your bedroom, make your bedroom your sanctuary. Get some non-toxic sheets, invest in a non-toxic mattress when you can. Maybe instead of, maybe look at your budget and see you might be spending money on something you really, don't need, and thinking about this mattress as an investment for your health and your well-being. And not just that, whenever you're making these decisions about your health, and maybe you're going to have to spend a little bit of money, think about how you're investing into your health now, so that your future, your elderly years, are going to be so much better, and you're going to actually save money in the long run because you're healthier. And the average person spends, I think, their last 16 years of their life sick, and I can't even imagine how many thousands of dollars. So not getting caught up on the money. I don't mean to be going down a tangent there, but focusing on the bedroom is really good. And then when it comes to, other areas of your life, there's tons of different areas with non-toxic living. I would suggest upgrading products as you run out. So personal care products, that's a really important area for women to pay attention to, because the average woman applies 168 chemicals before she leaves the house on a daily basis, which is crazy.
Wow.
And so if you're running out, instead of throwing out all of your makeup or throwing out all of your skincare or shower products, as you run out, upgrade for something better. And also think about ditching things that you don't need. There's a lot of buzz in the skincare world of needing to have 12 different steps for your skincare. So you need 12 different products and you need all these different things. And this is just my opinion, but I really don't think we need all these things in our life. And thinking about ways to go minimalist will really help you in the long run, your health, your wallet, ditching the toxic fabric softeners and different fragrances in your home. And slowly but surely, you're going to build up products and a home that is low toxic. And I haven't even talked about diet and water, but like slowly but surely, you're going to create this snowball effect in the best possible way. And the reason I say that it's a snowball effect is because when you're making these changes, you are going to have the positive reinforcement pretty quick after that shows that you feel better when you got rid of the toxic laundry sheets and when you changed to an organic mattress, or even just upgrading your toothpaste to a non-toxic option. You're going to feel better. And in turn, psychologically, that's going to motivate you to make these decisions. So just understanding that it's a slow process, it's a journey. It is not about perfection, but staying curious and trying to learn more and upgrade as you go.
That is awesome. I love that message because of a couple of things. I mean, first of all, when you said you kind of have to check your ego, I understand that precisely because, people will hire me to help them design and build a non-toxic home. And so I have my recommendations that I know that will work, but on the other hand, I have to understand everybody is different. Every client is different. What I just did for the last client, I can't do for the next. And the desires, their wants and needs, their financial issues, whatever it is, I look at being a good consultant or a good educator is all about listening to what the person across the table from you is saying. And I also look at it like in interior design. The best projects I've ever worked on in my career, and I've worked on thousands of commercial and residential projects, always had a good interior designer who listened to the clients and gave them exactly what they wanted, but they couldn't put it into words. The ones that were hard to work with were the ones who said, okay, I listened to what you said. Now here's my version because I have my own personal style, and it's not anything what the customer wants. It's almost as if the designer or the architect didn't even listen to the client. And so you have to check your own ego and your own style and say, well, the customer wants this. This is what I'm going to give them. The same thing is true with consulting with folks and helping them live in a healthier space. Everybody's needs are different, and you have to affirm every decision that's done, even if it's a small step. I remember years ago, I had a client who needed to repaint her entire home, but she could only afford to come in once every 2 months and buy 1 gallon of paint. That's all she had.
Mm-hmm.
And, anytime we could hook her up with, mistake gallons, damaged gallons that are still good, we would certainly help. But she didn't really care about that. She just said, well, I'm in the process of making my home healthier. I know it's one step at a time, but I'm going to get there. And you have to have that positive attitude. So I really appreciate
awesome.
your direction of that.
Yeah, thank you. I could, well said by you too.
So I want to talk a little bit about your podcast, Lifelong, because, and I've said this a few times, but I just got done listening to your latest episodes, and it was a 2-part series on fabric and clothing. And this is something that I just don't think we spend enough time talking about. Jay Watts, who's listening in on the show right now, he's the vice president of a company called AFM Safecoat. They make the world's best toxin-free paints and coatings, bar none. I've been recommending them on my projects for 30 years. He always says that the walls is like your skin, and your skin is your largest organ, and it's absorbing and releasing chemicals if there are those there. And so put that into perspective with your clothing. If you're wrapping yourself up with materials that are even, they may seem chemical free, but they're releasing microplastics. What is that doing to our body?
Yeah, so I'm glad you enjoyed that episode because thank you. It's definitely a fun subject for me to speak on because of my background working in the textile industry and studying textile and fashion design. And now, being a non-toxic educator and also having my podcast. So I appreciate that. But the biggest thing, I have a lot of thoughts and I'm trying to figure out where to begin. But the biggest thing to think about is what you said. Our skin is our largest organ. And toxins are absorbed into our body via 3 routes: inhalation, inhalation, digestion, and dermal absorption. Dermal absorption is where we need to focus right now because that means through your skin. So I encourage people to start thinking about what is touching their skin on a daily basis. And most people don't have the knowledge of what and how fabrics are synthesized and made. And I don't expect people to have that knowledge. I literally only know that because I had to take classes in college where I had to study the fabrics and remember all these tricky names and chemicals and things like that. But anyways, on every article of clothing, you can access the tag that will tell you the contents, the fiber contents. So definitely start looking there and looking for natural fibers. And some of those natural fibers to be on the lookout for are cotton, preferably organic cotton, wool and cashmere, silk, hemp, and the list really, linen, the list goes on. But what happened was, with the advent of the industrialization that our country and the world really went through in the last 100 years, is that the textile industry, these fibers that were once natural for how many thousands of years, they became synthetic versions of the once natural fibers. And with the advent of fast fashion, churning out all of these trending styles made really cheaply in sweatshops where people are treated and poorly and paid a non-living wage. On top of it, they're exposing workers to these extreme chemicals, and then the people that buy them are getting exposed to these chemicals. So some of the biggest issues there, someone listening might think, well, why does it matter that these fabrics were synthesized from chemicals? Like, why does that matter? And it matters, again, because it touches your skin. And it also matters because these fibers come from the petroleum industry. So essentially, people are wearing plastic. And when you're wearing plastic, not only is that exposing you to microplastics, which are accelerated into the environment, they kind of get jazzed up in a way when you're washing them and there's heat. They're released more easily. That's a better way to say it. Mm-hmm. They also contain these toxic chemicals like phthalates and PFAS, and there's a lot of additives. Again, I don't want to get into the weeds here, but the long and short of it is, fabrics always used to be natural, and now more and more fabrics are extremely unnatural. And besides just the fiber contents of the fabric, there's now a lot of innovative, quote unquote, proofing things that are being done to fabrics to stain proof them or waterproof them. And the consequences of these chemicals are insane. There was a study recently done on underwear and men's testosterone levels and sperm counts, which sounds wild, but it makes sense because it's, vital organs in our skin. And when you have these chemicals there touching you all day long, every single day, yes, they're going to get into your bloodstream. So I really encourage people to really start understanding the clothing that they're wearing by reading those tags when they're in the store, or when you're shopping online, you can click more info and you will always be able to find the fiber contents. And if you ever have questions about some of these finishes, like the stain proofing and the waterproofing, and even there's a color fastness proofing that prevents, color from fading, email companies, hold companies liable. They're there for you. They should be. So don't ever feel ashamed to reach out to a company and say, hey, I take my health very seriously. I don't want to be exposed to these chemicals. Can you really break down the exact fiber contents and your process of manufacturing? And hopefully they'll share some info. And if they don't, then it's a good time to find another brand. And there are plenty of brands, and I've spent years researching and finding the best and the most fashionable non-toxic brands, because back in the day, the only options were very frumpy, ugly clothes, in my opinion, being someone who studied fashion. I'm like, what? We need to solve this problem of, ugly, healthy clothes.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent years researching and finding the best brands that are fashionable. And I recently released my ebook, which is available on my website. It's non-toxic
Awesome.
clothing ebook. It's on my website, holisticwithheidi.com, under shop. So you can get that. I made it super affordable so everyone can access it. And yeah, I also have podcasts about it too.
Excellent. Well, I encourage everybody to go download that ebook.
Thank
Honestly,
you.
it's, I've been saying this for years that there are certain avenues of consumerism that are still yet to be really figured out. Lighting, everybody wants to know if there's more eco-friendly versions of lighting, and this is something that we're still waiting for. But fabrics and fashion clothing, it's just something that is, I think that's one of those things where people think, well, that's where I'm going to splurge a little bit. I'm going to buy something because it looks nicer in lieu of because it's actually healthier for me. But
Mm-hmm.
now I think it's even more difficult because most manufacturers have come out with this, what they call high performance fabrics.
Yep.
You're supposed to be able to wear these materials and they're more breathable, they're more rain resistant, they're wrinkle resistant. You have these golf jackets and these spandex for working out in and so forth, and they're supposed to be higher performance. By higher performance, that just immediately tells me lots of chemicals.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And some of those chemicals, like phthalates, those are a really prevalent one. Those are linked with serious endocrine disruption and even DNA damage, which
Wow.
it's like, hold on, this chemical can alter my DNA?
Right.
So, and again, it's not about perfection. It's not about switching your whole wardrobe. I very openly have a closet filled with toxic fabrics, but I've been slowly upgrading when possible
Mm-hmm.
to get more natural fibers and healthier materials. So it's not about being perfect, but being aware. And maybe if you're going through some health challenges, or you're pregnant or thinking about becoming pregnant, or you're dealing with some serious hormonal imbalance, I would go a little more hardcore and just try it. And if you're wearing the same thing and needing to wash it every single day, then do that. You can also go thrift shopping. That's another great way to save money and find sustainable options. Just again, looking for those natural fibers, reading the contents, feeling it, getting home, make sure you wash it in a non-toxic cleaner, and then put it in the sun so that the sun can cleanse out all of it, can off gas any chemicals that were used to clean it at the Goodwill or wherever you were thrift
Right.
shopping. So that's another just cost effective way. And thrifting is in, like, the influencers are doing that.
Oh
So
yeah, definitely. Well, and starting with base layers, I think that all of us can, if we're going to start somewhere to try to improve our collection of clothing, start with the layers that touch your skin the first. You know,
absolutely.
undergarments and socks and so forth, things that are on all day long, and you want to make sure those are the healthiest.
Yep. You hit the nail on the head there. I'm glad you
Excellent.
mentioned that.
Okay. And so we will definitely link that ebook in the show notes and put it on the podcast because
Thank you.
that's just a must for people. You got to download this ebook. It sounds phenomenal. Um, you are you're so well versed in many things. I mean, I could talk to you for hours, but I wanted to also
Thank
touch
you.
on the whole food side of things because as somebody who you have gone through mold exposure, mold toxicity, and we've talked about this before about how mold exposure could come either from the home you're living in or the place you're working, or it could come from the food that you are eating. And it's whether it's in the food or it's on the food, it needs to be properly cleaned off or what have you. I mean, touch a little bit about on that with food sources.
Yeah, definitely. So there are foods that tend to be more mold prone. Um, again, this isn't a one size fits all thing, but it's more of a, if you think that you're experiencing mold illness, if you aren't feeling your best, maybe try removing these things from your diet and seeing how you feel. And some of those include coffee beans. So finding a mold-free coffee is really important. There are brands like King Coffee, and I think it's Purity Coffee. I'm not a coffee drinker, but people always ask me for mold-free options. So, and coffee beans, think about that. Coffee beans are stored and they're so confined, and there's a lot of moisture, and they're coming from climates that are really warm and mildewy prone. So coffee beans. Another huge one is peanuts. Peanuts are super high in mold. I actually, to this day, being healed, having done a 180 with my health, I still avoid peanuts because they are very, very high in mycotoxins, which mycotoxins, as you know, Andy, but for the audience, mycotoxins are the toxic off gas that mold produces. So they're the toxic component of mold. So watching out for coffee beans and peanut butter. A lot of other nuts can be high in mold, but peanuts are the highest. And if you're someone who likes to eat nuts, I do. I love putting walnuts in my smoothie bowls and eating them on salads and that kind of thing. Store them in the fridge. Storing nuts and seeds in the fridge is a great way to prevent mold growth. In general, I would say, though, the most important thing is having a diet, and I don't like the word diet, but a lifestyle, a nutrition that is based in nutrient-dense foods and limits ultra-processed foods. So limiting those foods that are packaged and have a lot of different additives, because a lot of those additives trigger your immune system in a bad way and cause gut dysbiosis and mess with your microbiome, which in turn affects your whole body. So really limiting ultra-processed food as much as possible, just do your best, and increasing your nutrient-dense foods. And those nutrient-dense foods are, real, organic, pasture-raised meats. I've been into raw dairy lately. That's a whole other controversial subject, but it's very nutrient-dense. Eggs, fresh fruit, fresh produce, things that are one ingredient, not things that are processed and turned into something in a factory. And when you're able to eat more of a nutrient-dense diet, you actually become more resilient to handling stressors on the body like mold. So there's kind of a two-prong approach there. It's like limit mycotoxin foods, but also have a diet that's rich in nutrient-dense foods and limits ultra-processed foods.
I think if there's one thing we've all learned in the last few years because of the pandemic is that we need to prepare our bodies for this constant attack we have from outside things like COVID and so forth. And so we need to, it's like building your own set of internal armor. And the best way to do that is to eat properly, eat well. And then the other thing is sleep. And you mentioned this before, and the first thing you should do is make your bedroom that sanctuary. And I talk about this with every single client I have. I don't think that is emphasized enough in our society. I think that everybody will throw a platitude of, oh, you got to get better sleep. Okay, well, what does that actually mean? Because just because you spend 8 hours a night in your bedroom does not mean you're getting good quality restorative sleep. How do you sleep better? And so, yeah, it starts with having a great mattress, but it also starts with making sure that your body is in a position that it can fall asleep without outside agitation from electromagnetic fields, mold spores, toxic off-gassing, but then also your diet. It's these old, what they called wives' tales from decades ago,
I
that
love those.
your dreams are just a combination of who you saw the other day and what you had to eat right before you went to bed. But honestly, what you had to eat right before you went to bed can have a huge impact on how you sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sleep hygiene is very important. I think you just listed off so many wonderful options. I'm trying to think of some other things to add in there. As far as sleep hygiene, like you said, healthy diet, having the low toxic bedding and mattress, limiting EMFs, putting your phone on airplane mode or keeping your phone out of the room, turning Wi-Fi off at night, having the router away from the bed or not in your bedroom at all, hopefully. And so there's those three things. But in addition to that, some of the best things for sleep include daily sun exposure.
Yeah.
And Dr. Andrew Huberman, who is an amazing neuroscientist, he has a podcast show, The Huberman Lab. I learned a lot from his episode on sleep and the circadian rhythm. So, in order to have a restful night's sleep, one of the most important things you can do is making sure that your circadian rhythm is in rhythm, which
Hmm.
is very redundant.
Hmm.
But one of the best things is getting that sunlight before 2 p.m. every single day. So you can go outside after that, but there's a critical window of when you wake up through the early afternoon to making sure that you're getting enough sunlight, because what's happening is when you wake up, you and you get that sunlight right away, you're actually increasing your cortisol. And I don't know all the technical neurosciencey things like that, but what I do know, it has something to do with elevating your cortisol early in the day so that throughout the day it declines and you get more into a relaxed state. So there's this whole flow that you want to be in. And if you're at nighttime, you're on all these bright screens and you have all this light pollution, your brain is literally being signaled cortisol. It's time to be alert, time to be awake, time
Ah.
for the day. And it's not what we want. So at nighttime, turn the lights off, put your phone on that nighttime mode where
Mhm.
the screen goes a little orange, wear the glasses, or turn the phone off completely. I'm kind of a freak. I have to turn all the lights off.
Mhm.
And if I have a light on, I have like little warm lamps, just like small lamps that'll turn on at
Mhm.
nighttime. But the bright overhead, because I'm in an apartment, so you don't get to choose the lighting. It's that very aggressive, like surgery operating room lighting,
Mhm.
which is the last thing you want for sleep. So thinking about lighting and sun exposure will do wonders for your sleep.
Oh, I love that. And I think of even in my own household, I've been married for 30 years, and
Wow.
and and one of the things that both of us learned years ago is like after 7 o'clock at night, we don't talk about business. We don't talk about work.
Mm,
We completely avoid the subject because we don't want to both get worked up again and in talking about things. And so it's it- essentially light and now screens, your iPad, your computer screen, your iPhone, whatever, that's doing the exact same thing. It's working your mind up to the point where it's having this its own internal conversation and it can't shut off. So people like me, if I get worked up on a subject right before I go to bed, I lay in bed for hours and my mind is just spinning.
mm.
And so the only way for me to stop that is if it's summertime, I don't care if it's 2 o'clock in the morning, I'll walk outside barefoot and I'll walk in the grass.
I love that. Grounding with the earth.
Yep. And it absolutely works. But better off is to just avoid it to begin with so you don't have those hours of not being able to sleep. And
Yeah.
so it's such an important point. Great idea to bring up, Heidi.
Thank you. Yeah, I love your tip too with the avoiding work conversations or stressful chats after
Yeah.
7. My fiance and I were kind of finding what works for us. He has a crazy work schedule, so when he gets home, by the time we eat, sometimes we're not hanging out till like 8 p.m. and that's when he just worked a whole long day and he wants to go on his computer,
Mhm.
and it's like, no, this is stressful. Like you're going to be in such a high alert state before needing to go to bed. And Yeah. So just being mindful of like those conversations and
Mhm.
reducing your stress. And light is a form of stress.
Right.
It
And
is.
honestly, the older you get, the more it's going to impact you on the next day. When you're younger, uh, you can get away with a lot because you've got enough energy um, to get through these days. For me, once I hit my 50s, I realized that I need to be more mindful of what I do the last couple hours before trying to fall asleep because it can really have an impact on the next day.
Mhm.
So
I love that.
we're getting close to the end here. I just wanted to open it up if anybody has any questions. I know Jay's been popping on the chat and adding some points about circadian rhythm and turning off the
Oh,
Wi-Fi.
I'm just reading these now.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. Uh, does anybody else have any questions about either anything we talked about or anything else that I have yet to bring up? Please feel free to put it in the chat. If it's a longer question and you don't think you have enough time to put it in the chat, feel free to even just raise your hand. There's a little raise hand button on the bottom of your screen. And that way I know that you might be in the process of typing something. After this show is over, it'll go on to the Circle community for the next week or so and let anybody who wasn't able to join us live today listen to the show afterwards. And then about a week later, it gets put up as a podcast. So the only way you do get to ask questions is if you are joining us right now, and so feel free to ask any questions. Otherwise, Heidi, is there anything else that you'd like to make us aware of, and maybe something you're working on for with your new adventures?
Yeah, I think in closing, just thank you again for letting me have this opportunity. It's been a super fun and engaging conversation. I'm going to say it again. I love that we're both Wisconsinites. It's actually a warm day up in the Midwest today. But yeah, everyone, if interested, please follow along on Instagram. My brand is Holistic with Heidi, at Holistic with Heidi. And that is where I share all things easy, non-toxic living. And it's just a fun community that I've built there. I also have my podcast, Lifelong, which you can find on all major streaming platforms. I'm also on Instagram with the podcast at lifelong_pod. And yeah, I really just love making myself available for questions and comments. And at the end of the day, just really love educating people. So be sure to follow along on those. And if you want to get the ebook too, that's my newest update. Other than that, there will be more offerings and things like that on my website in the coming months.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Everybody download that ebook. Visit Heidi at one of her platforms. You are just an absolute wealth of knowledge, and you are a wonderful speaker, and so it's very easy to listen to you talk about this. I just feel that I don't have to try to understand certain words you're saying because they roll off your tongue so easy, but yet I understand them, and I'm sure the audience will also say the same thing. So thank you for being so clear in your message.
Wow, thank you. That's a major compliment. So I appreciate it. And this was awesome.
Excellent. Thank you, Heidi. And everybody else, we will see you again next week on Non-Toxic Environments. Have a wonderful week.